Let me tell you another story. A story of a man who was trapped in a strange land, all because he wanted a book. That's right, my upload schedule has remained complete garbage, because for 2 months I have once again been sucked into a part of Final Fantasy XIV. Except this time I kinda wish I hadn't, and that thing is Eureka. But really the main reason I'm actually getting this video done is because on the 13th of October, patch 5.35 will launch the Boston Southern Front, basically the new Eureka, and I wanted to get this video and all the Eureka content out of the way before it depopulates for the foreseeable future. So what is Eureka? Eureka is defined as a cry of joy or satisfaction when one finds or discovers something, which happens to be the exact opposite of what I feel when actually stepping foot into Final Fantasy's Eureka. Eureka takes place after completing the main story of the Stormblood expansion, and is basically an MMO within an MMO, featuring its own leveling system with unique combat mechanics. It's also fittingly centered around the NPC Krill, because most of the time in Eureka, I have a strong urge to krill myself. Eureka is split into 4 zones: Anemos, Pagos, Pyros, and Hydatos. Upon entering Eureka, one will find that all their abilities have been synced to level 70, their gear is synced down to item level 300, and most fun of all, they start at level 1. You see, Eureka uses its own leveling system from 1 to 60, using elemental experience, which is separate from the rest of the game. Unfortunately, said experience is also a pain in the ass to farm, because you either need to fight monsters at the same or higher levels for a good old XP chain grind, or spam fates called notorious monsters within Eureka to level up. It's also worth noting that levels actually make a massive difference in Eureka, especially early on, because fighting anything 3 levels above you alone is significantly difficult, and anything 5 or more levels higher than you is equivalent to suicide. Eureka also has a questline and a story, which requires you to go to places not marked on the map, forcing you to either tread headlong into danger or use a community map like a sane person. However, doing Eureka quote-unquote just for the story is like giving yourself food poisoning just to see what color your vomit is.
Don't try it!
Upon arriving in Eureka, you will notice that monsters have an elemental symbol above their heads, which is a good time to talk about the major board system in Eureka. Now, if we have been paying attention to our table of elements, we will know that different elements have strengths against some elements and weaknesses to another. In Anemos, by doing the questline, you will obtain 5 pieces of magicite, which can be slotted into your major board. This board can then be rotated freely when fighting monsters in Eureka. If you have a matching element to a monster, you get a massive defensive bonus against it, while having an element strong against that monster gives you a huge offensive bonus, making Eureka a complex game of rock, paper, scissors. Now, if you are soloing enemies, tanks and healers generally want to have offensive bonuses, while DPS players want to have defensive bonuses to make up for their respective weaknesses. But this is a great time to segue into talking about the real way, the proper way, and yet the hardest part about playing all of Eureka: having friends. You see, Eureka is designed in a way that it becomes exponentially less cancerous the more friends you have that are also insane enough to do it with you. By having a full party with a tank, healer, and DPS, you can have your tank put on full defensive elements and pull an entire clown car of enemies, while your DPS go full offensive on Major and just burn down the entire route with AoE ability. This also knocks out your weekly Eureka challenge log quickly, which serves as your main source of XP besides notorious monster fates. Speaking of experience, here's the first big issue with Eureka. If you die above level 6 and resurrect in town, you lose experience. A lot of experience. If you do this above level 11, you can even D-level, which is of course extremely fun game design. Who wouldn't want that? Now, if you die anywhere in Eureka, whatever you do, do not click the Resurrect and Town button. What you should do instead is control right click your map and shout your coordinates and ask for a raise, and pray that someone is kind enough to come over and resurrect your ass in time, or you lose 25% of your experience. Remember how I said notorious monster fates were the main source of XP in Eureka? In order to spawn a notorious monster, you need to kill a lot of specific enemies that will spawn the NM once a certain quota has been reached, and assuming the monster hasn't been murdered recently and is on cooldown. Certain NMs also have specific spawn conditions, such as Pazuzu, the strongest NM of Anemos, which requires killing enemies that only spawns at night, and after hitting the kill quota, it will only spawn while the weather is windy. Unfortunately, there's nothing in the actual game to show you if something is on cooldown or when the next spot of weather will hit, meaning that if you want to farm notorious monsters efficiently, you'll either need to make your own insta tracker or shout ask the instance for one. However, even at max elemental level, people still farm NMs because they drop crystals and upgrade materials for relic armors and relic weapons. Hell, I went to Eureka at first because I really wanted one of the relics for glamour purposes, the Scholar Book. It's also worth noting that if you intend to complete a relic, you should finish your Anemos steps before progressing to Pagos, since there are parts of Pagos weapon grind that only become available after possessing an Anemos relic, and these aren't retroactively rewarded to you, meaning that if you go and do Pagos and then come back and finish the Anemos steps, whatever progress you have made in Pagos will be scuffed, so to speak. Upon reaching level 20 in Anemos and finishing the related quests, you will unlock the ability to travel to the next area of Eureka, Eureka Pagos. Eureka Pagos follows much of the same rules as Anemos, but worse. You see, Pagos was designed with one simple core philosophy in mind: fuck the player. You see, apparently the developers of Square Enix got upset that people were just zooming between notorious monsters in Anemos without a care in the world, and they wanted us to slow down, appreciate the map design, watch where we were going.
Why are you running?
And so they made Pagos.
Why are you
The
running?
entirety of Pagos is a giant death trap, with cliffs you can fall off and die, if you're in combat at the time, which will happen because Square Enix generously put hostile monsters near every cliff face. As well as sleeping ice dragons that wake up and one-shot you if you don't toggle walk to slowly sneak past them. Many of the high-level zones in Pagos to access important notorious monsters or forge special crystals that are used in making a relic also require you to fall down specific cliffs onto tiny ledges, which, as you guessed it, also have sleeping dragons on them. Pagos also introduces bunnies, which are creatures that will lead you into death traps for almost no reward at all. The bunnies in Pagos are not worth doing. There is a reason why every other notorious monster fate gets stockpiled once they spawn, but these two fates are almost always ignored. If you are intending to grind the relic like me, you will realize that Pagos also has a really fucked up grind to it, which is called Frosted Protean Crystals. You see, in Anemos you only needed Anemos and Protean Crystals, which were quite easy to farm, just by doing the fates normally. And by the time you actually got to Pazuzu, you had more than enough crystals to make your relic. Unfortunately, in Pagos, you need to have a Anemos weapon. Only then do you unlock something called light farming, where Gerald gives you a kettle and asks you to kill shit. Now, one relic requires 26 Frosted Protean Crystals, and you farm crystals by doing fates and getting light that you can then forge into Frosted Protean Crystals at this special forge in a death trap area of the map, naturally. You need 26 of these things, and if you're just leveling through Pagos normally, by the time you're done, you'll probably only have about half that amount, which is not very fun because it means you need to stay in Pagos for a very, very long time. So now that you understand that Pagos was designed to break the player, what this also translates to is that any player that you encounter who has progressed to Eureka, Pyros and beyond is probably mentally unstable, at least in one way. Which is a shame, because Eureka Pyros is when the experience starts getting interesting. You see, where Anemos and Pagos were simply go here and kill shit, Pyros starts throwing some interesting curveballs into the mix. The most notable addition to Pyros are things called logograms, which are items you find from either playing in Pyros or doing bunny treasure hunts, which are now worth doing. Logograms can then be deciphered at an NPC for things called manems, which are then put through a machine to create logo sections, with each action having its own recipes. Logo sections are basically a set of additional duty abilities that, when activated, range from simple abilities like healing or raising people, which can be used on the DPS class, which widens your playstyle, or physical and magical defense buff that you can place on yourself and other players, or just straight up buffs to your own damage or healing or survivability. One of the most useful logo sections is called Spirit of the Remembered, which not only increases your health and defenses, but also grants a 70% chance to automatically revive on death without incurring an XP loss. Keep this action in mind, because I'll be talking a lot about it later. Some logograms unlock interesting ways to play the game. For example, one method of power leveling in Pyros and Hydatos is to equip this action called Reflect L, which reflects all magical damage taken back to the attacker, and then aggro an entire clown car worth of sprites, which only do magical damage, meaning that they will kill themselves on the player. However, in order to take more damage from said attacks, and therefore reflecting more damage, you want as little magical defense as possible. What this translates to, you will see some players stripped completely naked to reduce their magical defense to 0, and be chased by an angry army of sprites in order to power level, which is of course completely unhinged, but also incredibly fitting for any player who has actually progressed to Pyros. Pyros is also designed less to outright kill inattentive players. For example, the sleeping dragons are still a thing, but the pathways that they are on are no longer so narrow that you must walk past them. It is possible to give them a wide berth without waking them up anymore, as well as no stupid cliff falls which are designed to just murder players. Pyros also introduces the ability to add a 6 magicite to your board, through extremely rare items that drop from certain notorious monsters. For example, I was lucky enough to get a Skull's Claw drop, which is one of the 3 items you are required to exchange for the 6 magicite. But because I'm not completely insane from doing Eureka yet, I opted to do the sensible thing, which is to sell it on the market board for 2.6 million gil. Which also brings me to my next point about one of the reasons people do Eureka: money. You see, there's actually a healthy amount of gil to be made in Eureka if you are somehow able to stomach past Anemos and Pagos. Besides selling things like notorious monster magicite drops for exorbitant amounts, things like bunny fates are now worth doing because they can give like 100k gil on a gold chest, or if you're even luckier, mounts that sell for like 3 million on my server, as well as rare logograms that fetch a handsome price. The question is Eureka profitable enough to suffer through? No! Save your sanity! There's easier and faster ways to make gil that don't involve the mental equivalent of sticking an electric drill through your ear holes. But since this is a video about my entire Eureka experience, we have to talk about the whole package. So let's move on to the final zone of my Eureka madness. Hydatos, which is really just the UK. Hydatos takes place on a huge, wide open map, which is nice because it no longer funnels you into fuck you choke points on the map, where you are almost guaranteed to aggro something and be chased across all of Eorzea. However, keep in mind that the level cap in Eureka is 60, and everything on the right side of the map is level 60 or higher, and will absolutely not hesitate to tear your skin off. Hydatos notorious monsters are also incredibly stingy, dropping like 5 or 10 crystals per fate, when the full cost to create one relic weapon set is 350 crystals. Which is worse when you realize these crystals are used for other things as well, namely the other reason people do Eureka for besides money: fashion. You see, Eurekan elemental armor is extremely fashionable, but it costs 200 Pyros crystals and 190 Hydatos crystals per set, with per set being fending, healing, casting, so on and so forth. Now these can also be further enhanced through something I'll talk about later, but finally, after grinding my way to the level cap of 60, farming the crystals I needed, making not one, but 2 relic weapons, one of which was basically just an RGB gaming PC setup in a sword form, and finally finishing the main questline of Eureka, I was finally greeted with this screen. Surely my suffering was over, right? Right? Yeah, no, of course there's more. There's always more. The Baldesian Arsenal is the culmination of your efforts in Eureka, serving as the endgame encounter for the piece of content. There's a lot to the arsenal, and I don't want to turn this segment of the video into a full guide because A, I have standards and I haven't run the arsenal enough times to be making a full guide. And B, I don't want this video to stretch into an hour because that's really how much nonsense the arsenal can and will throw at you. So I'll try to be brief and summarize the gist of the suffering that the arsenal brings upon you. Before talking about the Baldesian arsenal, it's worth noting that the hardest part about BA is not the dungeon itself, but getting into the dungeon in the first place. You see, to enter the Baldesian arsenal, one needs to first finish the Eureka questline, then kill the level 60 Ovni Fate boss for a buff that lasts 10 minutes. 4 minutes after Ovni dies, 48 blue portals will spawn at fixed locations across Hydatos, which can be entered using an item called an Etheric Stabilizer. This is called stabbing a portal. After another 3 minutes, red portals will take their place, which can be entered without a stabilizer. What this translates to is that entering the Baldesian Arsenal is the most paranoid 10 minutes of your life, because the portals are technically free for all, and someone can come out and stab your portal while you're waiting for it to turn red. What's worse is, if someone stabs a portal, it shuffles the order of all the remaining portals, meaning that a red portal can still spawn in an area that a blue portal will stab, which yes, translates to someone else on the map being cucked of their portal. And you wanna know what's even more fun about this design of entry? The Baldesian Arsenal is designed to require at least 3 to 6 tanks, meaning that if some asshole DPS snipes a pre-made main tank or even key healer slot in the arsenal, the entire run becomes a lot spicier. All of this translates to portal wars, where even if you have staked your claim on a portal, it doesn't stop some asshole from walking up and trying to snipe your portal. But I'm faster on the draw. Upon arriving in the Baldesian Arsenal, you will notice this very fun debuff on your screen, telling you that people cannot be resurrected normally. The Baldesian Arsenal is technically easier than the average Alliance raid, but it is designed to wear you down through attrition. The only way to revive is either A, hope your Spirit of the Remembered procs, B, use a healer limit break 3, or C, have a healer use Sacrifice L, a special logo section, on you to revive you, which kills them in the process. Said healer will then pray that their own Spirit of the Remembered procs and revives them, or else it leads to an extremely fun game of healers chaining Sac L and hoping the madness stops when someone's remembered actually procs. The Baldesian Arsenal is also full of traps, which will either explode in a massive radius and kill everyone when stepped upon, or inflict a massive bleed on you that kills you in 2 to 3 ticks if your healer doesn't immediately Esuna you. These traps are purposely placed in either hallways that everyone needs to pass through, or near treasure coffers, which is incredibly fun design since it's 100% intended to kill greedy or reckless players that run ahead. In order to avoid these traps, you need someone with the Perception L logo section to walk forward and reveal them slowly like a minesweeper. The Baldesian arsenal is also full of trash mobs that can quickly overwhelm even a full group of 48 players. They can and will one-shot any player that isn't a tank on full defensive magia or properly geared, and they have nasty abilities that need special treatment to be dealt with. For example, Arsenal Centaurs will cast a skill called Berserk and wipe the run if they are not interrupted. But the only skill that can actually interrupt them is not a stun, but to cast Sleep on them. Yeah, that's right. That spell you've taken off your Black Mage and Healer hotbars is actually a mandatory skill in BA. Trash mobs also sometimes like to hide inside rooms, which is both hilarious and scream-inducing when they pop out and flank the convoy.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
By progressing through the arsenal by beating bosses and clearing rooms, you will be rewarded with this item called Eureka Fragments, which are used to either upgrade your relic or your elemental +1 armor into +2 armor to give the all-powerful Eureka bonus stat. And wearing a full Eurekan bonus set at level 60 makes you roughly equivalent to level 68. There is also a rare chance to get Damascene cloths and cryptic seals, which can be exchanged at an NPC in Kugane for the best gear in Eureka. These items are item level 300 and have 5 materia slots, meaning that the material you meld on it actually takes effect in Eureka as well as the Baldesian arsenal, compared to elemental armor, which is 390, which gets synced down and therefore it smells like Node. As such, these items also sell for a lot of gil on the market board. Communication in the arsenal is also incredibly fucky, because you aren't actually sorted automatically into parties and alliances as you are in alliance raid roulettes. You have to actually use yell and shout to communicate in the arsenal, such as at the start of the raid when it splits into 2 in order to fight 2 separate bosses. These bosses are Art and Owain and require you to kill them separately but at the same time. Owain is easier and lag friendlier than Art, with his main mechanic being stand on the spear of the opposite element. And Art is the spears repeat the last skill the boss used, so adjust accordingly. Of course, sometimes the other side takes forever to kill their boss, and you'll be forced to put on defensive magicite and wait for them to finish. Once you're done with Art and Owain, you are followed by more traps and trash mobs, and what's that? Oh, nobody brought Perception L? This brings us to Raiden, which is basically Odin all over again. Raiden is actually quite easy once you memorize his attack patterns and remember to stand inside him while he casts Whirling Zanketsuken. Of course, this doesn't stop the game from lagging out and you getting clipped by 2 AoEs that you had clearly avoided. This is where I'd insert a VPN sponsorship, if I had one. You're probably noticing a pattern by now, and that is BA is a boss gauntlet with in-betweens of nasty trash mobs and traps. Because after Raiden, there's more rooms and a portal to progress that can only be revealed with Perception L. This all leads to Absolute Virtue, a Final Fantasy XI nostalgia super boss that requires people in Hydatos to complete a support fate to weaken it before you can defeat it, which also allows for 8 more people to enter BA as reinforcements for up to a maximum of 56 players. Absolute Virtue is also technically quite easy as long as you remember go to the opposite color and stay near the boss so he doesn't petrify you with his cleave, and god fucking damn it, I got clipped by ping again. Once Absolute Virtue fell, I proceeded and was met with the final boss of the arsenal, Proto-Osma, or as I like to call it, the most intense player versus player experience this game has to offer. You see, Proto-Osma actually shares a lot of mechanics with the Ozma from the level 60 Weeping City of Mukak raid. But because people are cowards and purposely cheese their way into every AR roulette, being Crystal Tower, experts consider the Weeping City raid to be one of the rarest Pepes in existence, and by extension, The mechanics of Ozma are a complete mystery to the average player. Ozma has a lot of mechanics, but most of them can be called out and dealt with easily. Since this isn't a full guide, I'm only going to talk about the notorious two mechanics that ruin every single run, which are Meteor and Acceleration Bomb. To help you fully understand, Meteor is a mechanic that marks random players with AoE proximity markers that must be moved to specific spots so that the overlapping proximity damage doesn't kill everyone. While Acceleration Bomb is this icon above your head that if you are doing anything, casting, moving, auto-attacking, whatever, when the counter actually finishes, it'll explode around you, dealing 90% of everyone's max HP and probably killing them due to follow-up damage. Acceleration Bomb is incredibly simple. If you see you get it, you deselect Ozma, stop auto-attacking, stop casting, stop doing anything until it resolves, and then nobody explodes. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. Every Baldesian Arsenal run is basically a dice roll of whether you have that one idiot in 56 who either puts meteors on the wrong part of the platform, or a moron who drops a fat acceleration bomb in the middle of the platform and blows everyone up. And if my math checks out, that's about a 98.2% chance of having an idiot, which is not good. Oh right, did I mention you need to be alive when Ozma dies in order to get the credit? Even if your corpse doesn't miraculously get sucked up by Black Hole, which is an ability Ozma casts regularly, being dead at the end means that you don't get the achievement and therefore the clear. There is no justice in Ozma. You can and will be punished for someone else's fuck-ups.
You better stop!
And yet her remembered is the only one that procs, while the tank and I have our corpses sucked out due to Black Hole, ending our run. Your entire pre-made group can do every mechanic properly, call out and handle every lethal Ozma transformation, and still wipe because one fucker decided to plop their meteor smack in the middle of their platform. In fact, after wiping 4 Ozmas in a row, I can finally say that I fully understand how Artbird feels.
We did everything right! Everything that was asked of us, and still it came to this!
To conclude, the Baldesian Arsenal puts Alamigo to shame when it comes to salt mining, and is probably the most chaotic piece of endgame content I've ever seen, because it's an oxymoron. It's a dungeon that is best cleared with a coordinated pre-made team, and yet encourages and even rewards free-for-all, cutthroat and disruptive entry methods that throw a wrench into any pre-made plans that you might have already had. And if you consider these experiences were on Tonberry, a Japanese server, with the Japanese being the most polite and organized of the 3 regions, I shudder to think about how awful and chaotic Eureka can be in the NA and EU data centers. And yet through all that, I guess I somehow had a bit of fun. Beating the Arsenal by being alive when Ozma dies grants you an achievement that gives you an Ozma mount, meaning you can finally show off to all your friends and family at what a lunatic you have actually become. So what was the point of this video? I don't fucking know. Maybe you enjoyed me rambling about my suffering in Eureka and found it entertaining. Or maybe I have achieved my goal of dissuading anyone with half a brain cell from stepping foot in the hellhole that is Eureka. Or maybe it's a benchmark to see how the new Bosnian Southern Front, or Eureka as the boys call it, improves or fucks up on the flawed formulas of Eureka. Sort of a before and after kind of deal. But at least I can say I finished my giant shiny joke book. The reason I started Eureka to begin with. And who needs to cast spells when you can cave in the skull of some unfortunate creature with one smack of your hefty toe? And really, at the end of the story, that's all that really matters. Hey, thanks for reaching the end of this video with me. I'm hoping to follow this up with a video on the Bosnian Southern Front. It's kind of a part 2 in comparison to see how much it's improved on the lessons taught by Eureka. A massive thanks to the people who made this video possible, my 3 company mates who started Eureka with me and all dropped out by the end. I don't blame you. Raya7, who taught me a lot about Eureka, gave me a bunch of logograms to get started in Pyros, and carried my dumbass through a lot of the late game Pyros. As well as Archon Shark and the rest of the BA addicts on the Elemental Content Achievers Discord server, link will be in the description, for organizing and coordinating Baldesian Arsenal teaching runs and carrying me to my first BA clear. And of course, a massive thanks to my patrons for continuing to support me, even though my upload schedule has been fucking garbage. Your patience is greatly appreciated. And on that note, good night, and I'll see you in Bozja.